The morning sun cast golden reflections across Lake Westmore as I sipped my coffee on the dock. This view was precisely why I had scraped together every penny to buy this modest lakefront home in Shoreline Estates. After 15 years of apartment living in the city, having my own private access to the water felt like true freedom. The gentle lapping of waves against the weathered wooden posts beneath me created a soothing rhythm that I had come to cherish during my first 6 months of ownership. I had deliberately chosen this property because of its distance from the community marina. While many residents enjoyed the social atmosphere of shared docks and boat slips, I preferred the solitude of my own space. My real estate agent had assured me that my property deed included explicit water rights and full ownership of the existing dock structure. I had verified this information myself before signing the final papers. The dock might not have been fancy, just a simple wooden walkway extending 30 feet into the lake with a small covered area at the end, but it was mine. That peaceful morning routine shattered when I noticed a figure standing at the edge of my lawn. A woman in pressed khakis and a polo shirt embroidered with the Shoreline Estates logo approached with purposeful strides. She clutched a clipboard to her chest and wore the expression of someone prepared to deliver unwelcome news. I rose from my chair as she reached the start of my dock. "Good morning," she called with practiced politeness. "Are you the new owner of this property?" I nodded, setting my coffee mug on the small table beside my chair. "Yes, moved in about 6 months ago. Is there something I can help you with?" She consulted her clipboard before responding. "My name is Janet Miller. I am with the Homeowners Association Compliance Committee. We have received several complaints about unauthorized use of this dock structure." I blinked, certain I had misheard her. "Unauthorized? This is my dock. It came with the property." Janet shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "According to our records, all waterfront structures must comply with Section 7.3 of the Community Bylaws, which requires formal approval for private dock usage. Our records show no such approval for this structure." My confusion quickly turned to irritation. I checked all the paperwork before buying. The dock is included in my property deed. My real estate agent confirmed there were no issues. Janet remained unmoved. "I am just here to inform you of the violation. You will need to cease use of the dock until proper approval is granted by the board." She extended a form toward me. "This is an official notice of noncompliance." I did not take the paper. "This has to be a mistake. The dock has been here for decades. The previous owner used it without any problems." "The previous owner had a grandfathered exception that expired with the sale of the property," she replied, her tone suggesting this should have been obvious. "The new board is conducting a thorough review of all waterfront structures to ensure compliance." New board. I had received the standard welcome packet from the HOA, but had paid little attention to the recent election announcements. Living at the far end of the community, I had focused on settling into my new home rather than neighborhood politics. Over the next week, I noticed increased activity along the shoreline, board members walking the perimeter of the lake, pointing at various docks and taking photographs. Then the formal letter arrived in my mailbox, bearing the official HOA letterhead. The language was stilted with legal jargon, but the message was clear: cease all use of my dock immediately or face escalating fines starting at $100 per day. At the bottom of the letter, an elegant signature caught my eye: Beverly Harding, HOA President. The name meant nothing to me at the time, but a quick search revealed she had been elected just 2 months before I moved in. Her campaign had promised stricter enforcement of community standards and upgraded amenities to increase property values. I stood at my kitchen window, letter in hand, staring out at my beloved dock. What had been my sanctuary was now apparently a battleground. I had no idea then just how far Beverly Harding would go to assert her authority, or how thoroughly I would come to regret her making an enemy of me. The HOA letter sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days while I attempted to make sense of their claims. According to the notice, my dock violated multiple sections of the community bylaws: improper material composition, non-standard dimensions, unauthorized boat storage capabilities, and most puzzlingly, interference with designated community waterway access. Each violation carried its own schedule of fines that would begin accumulating in 10 business days, unless I submitted a formal remediation plan. I pulled out the thick folder of documents from my home purchase. The property deed clearly stated, including existing dock structure and associated water rights extending 50 feet from shoreline. My closing documents included an HOA disclosure statement, but nothing mentioned dock restrictions or approval processes. I found the community bylaws buried at the back of the welcome packet. Section 7.3, regarding waterfront structures, was vague at best, referring readers to an architectural committee addendum that had not been included in my materials. I called my real estate agent, who seemed genuinely surprised. "That dock has been there since the 1980s, she said. "No one has ever questioned it before. Let me make some calls." While waiting for her to investigate, I decided to introduce myself to some neighbors. The couple 2 doors down, Richard and Corinne Davis, had lived in Shoreline Estates for over a decade. They invited me in for iced tea when I mentioned the dock situation. "Beverly Harding is on a power trip," Richard said, lowering his voice despite being in his own living room. "Ever since she became president, she has been finding violations everywhere." Corinne nodded in agreement. She fined the Johnsons $500 for their bird bath because it was 3 inches taller than allowed. The Wilsons had to remove their vegetable garden because she decided it was an unsightly agricultural use in a residential zone. "Has anyone stood up to her?" I asked. Richard and Corinne exchanged glances. "Mark Brennan challenged her about his fence height," Corinne said. 2 weeks later, the compliance committee found 6 violations on his property. He ended up paying nearly $2,000 in fines. As I continued meeting neighbors, similar stories emerged. Beverly Harding had transformed a once relaxed community into a web of rules and regulations. Most residents simply complied rather than face her wrath. The board members, handpicked by Beverly during the election, rubber-stamped her decisions without question. The monthly HOA meeting provided my first opportunity to address the board directly. The community center meeting room was arranged like a small courtroom, with the 7 board members seated at an elevated table facing rows of chairs. Only about 20 residents attended, most sitting silently with resignation already evident on their faces. When public comments began, I approached the microphone with my documents in hand. "Good evening. My name is Alex Miller. I recently received a notice claiming my dock is in violation of community standards. My property deed clearly shows." "We are aware of your situation, Mr. Miller," Beverly Harding interrupted. She was a tall woman in her 50s with immaculately styled silver hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "The deed does not supersede HOA regulations, which require board approval for all waterfront structures." "But this dock has existed for decades," I countered, attempting to show her my paperwork. "My closing documents make no mention of needed approvals." Beverly barely glanced at my documents. "Previous oversights do not constitute current compliance. You may submit an application for dock approval, which the Architectural Committee will review at our next quarterly meeting. That is 3 months from now, I protested. And meanwhile, I am prohibited from using my own property. Rules are rules, Mr. Miller, she replied with finality. We have several other matters to address tonight. Thank you for your comment. Before I could respond, she nodded to the next person waiting to speak. I remained standing for a moment, stunned by the dismissal, before returning to my seat. Throughout the rest of the meeting, I observed how efficiently Beverly shut down any questioning of board decisions. The other board members remained silent partners in her governance. 3 days later, a new letter arrived, this one threatening remediation action if I failed to secure my dock against use. The HOA claimed the right to hire contractors to remove the structure entirely, with all costs billed to my account. The letter included photographs of my property taken without my knowledge or permission. That evening, I watched from my kitchen window as Beverly Harding and 2 other board members walked slowly past my property line. They stopped at the edge of my lawn, pointing toward my dock and taking more photos. Even from a distance, I could see Beverly's satisfied expression as she made notes on her clipboard. It was becoming clear that this was not about compliance with obscure regulations. This was a deliberate campaign targeting my property specifically. What I could not understand was why. What made my modest dock so important to Beverly Harding? The question kept me awake that night as I realized this battle was just beginning, and I needed to understand the real stakes before I could fight back effectively. The following weekend, I decided to investigate the community marina located at the opposite end of Lake Westmore. Although I had driven past it numerous times, I had never had reason to visit the facility since I had my own dock. The marina served as the primary boat launch for residents without waterfront property and housed the community boat club. As I approached, I immediately noticed unusual activity for a Saturday morning. Men in hard hats clustered around large rolled blueprints spread across the hood of a truck. Surveying equipment dotted the shoreline, and markers with small orange flags had been placed throughout the water near the marina entrance. None of this had been mentioned at the HOA meeting. I parked my car and strolled casually toward the public walkway, nodding politely to a couple launching their kayaks. Near the main dock, I overheard fragments of conversation from the work crew. The entrance channel will need to be at least twice as wide to accommodate the new slips, a man in a blue hard hat was saying as he gestured toward the water. What about that private dock on the north end? Another worker asked, pointing in the direction of my property. The plans show it overlapping with the proposed navigation channel. The first man shrugged. Not our problem. The HOA president said they are handling all property issues before construction begins. My pulse quickened. This explained the sudden interest in my dock. Whatever they were planning for the marina expansion apparently conflicted with my property rights. Instead of approaching me directly, Beverly had chosen to invoke obscure regulations to force compliance. Monday morning found me at the county record's office, requesting all recent permit applications filed by the Shoreline Estates HOA. The clerk returned with a thick folder containing architectural drawings and a comprehensive proposal for a marina enhancement project. The plans detailed an ambitious expansion that would double the number of boat slips, add a fuel station, and significantly widen the marina entrance to allow for larger vessels. One particular diagram caught my attention. It showed the projected navigation channel extending significantly beyond the current marina boundaries, directly overlapping with a portion of my water rights. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Resolve North End private dock issue before Phase 1." Further research online that evening revealed something even more disturbing. The construction company awarded the Marina contract, Harding Marine Development, shared more than a name with our HOA president. Beverly Harding's husband was the company founder, and their son served as current CEO. This wasn't merely a community improvement project. It was a family business venture disguised as HOA activity. The next day, I consulted with Marcus Thompson, a real estate attorney specializing in water rights. His office overlooked the county courthouse, walls lined with leather-bound law books and framed diplomas. After reviewing my documents and the marina expansion plans, he leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "Your position is legally sound," he confirmed. "Riparian rights in this state are well established. Your deed clearly includes ownership of the dock and water rights extending 50 feet from shore. They cannot simply declare your dock invalid to clear the way for their project." "Then why all the violation notices?" I asked. Marcus sighed. "HOAs operate in a gray area. They can establish and enforce rules that sometimes appear to override property rights. Fighting them can be expensive and time-consuming, which is why most homeowners simply comply." "What would you recommend?" "Document everything," he advised. "Record all interactions, collect evidence of selective enforcement, and most importantly, research the marina project thoroughly. If there is a conflict of interest with the HOA president benefiting financially, that could be your strongest leverage." As I drove home, I noticed Beverly Harding's luxury SUV parked near my property. She stood with two men in business attire near the shoreline, gesturing toward my dock. I parked in my driveway and approached them directly. "Can I help you?" I asked, maintaining a polite tone despite my rising anger. Beverly startled slightly before composing herself. "Mr. Miller, these gentlemen are from the Architectural Committee. We are assessing compliance issues along the shoreline." One of the men extended his hand. "James Wilson, committee chair, just doing our regular inspection." "Interesting," I replied, not shaking his offered hand. "I notice you have not inspected any other docks today, just mine." Beverly interjected smoothly. "We are working our way around the lake. Your property happens to be first on our route today." Through my living room window later that afternoon, I observed them through binoculars. They had not continued around the lake as claimed but had returned to the marina. Beverly showed something on her tablet to the men, unmistakably photographs of my dock from multiple angles. The group then studied the water between my property and the marina, measuring distances with hand gestures. That evening, I used my computer to analyze the public records of Beverly's term as HOA president. The marina expansion project had been her first major initiative after taking office, presented as a community improvement that would increase property values. What she had not mentioned in any public meeting was her family's direct financial benefit from the multi-million-dollar construction contract. The pieces were falling into place. My dock's position created an obstacle for their planned navigation channel. Rather than approach me honestly or offer compensation, Beverly had decided to weaponize HOA regulations to force me out of the way. She had clearly underestimated my determination to protect my property rights and my willingness to fight back against her abuse of power. As I reviewed the marina blueprints once more, I made a decision. I would not be intimidated into surrendering what was legally mine. Beverly Harding had chosen the battlefield, but she had no idea what kind of fight she had just started. The community newsletter arrived in my mailbox the following week. Typically filled with gardening tips and social event announcements, this issue featured a prominent article about water safety concerns at Lake Westmore. Although my name was never mentioned, a photograph clearly showed my dock with caption text warning about non-compliant structures endangering safe navigation. The article urged residents to report similar violations to the Compliance Committee. Walking through the neighborhood became an uncomfortable experience. Neighbors who had previously greeted me warmly now averted their eyes or offered only brief acknowledgments before hurrying away. At the local grocery store, I overheard two women discussing that troublemaker at the north end who refuses to follow the rules. The HOA was systematically turning community opinion against me. Dark green SUVs bearing the Shoreline Estates security logo began making regular passes by my home. They drove slowly, occupants openly taking photographs of my property. When I approached one vehicle to question their activities, the driver simply stated they were conducting routine compliance monitoring and drove away. My attorney advised me to document every incident while continuing to research the Marina expansion project. I installed security cameras covering my yard, dock, and the shoreline approaches to my property. The footage quickly proved valuable. On 3 consecutive evenings, security vehicles parked at the edge of my property line for extended periods, shining spotlights across my dock and the adjacent water. Then came the early morning confrontation that pushed the conflict to a new level. I had risen at dawn to enjoy coffee on my dock, deliberately ignoring the HOA's prohibition, when I spotted 2 figures already standing at the end of my dock. Janet Miller from the Compliance Committee and a man I recognized as James Wilson from the Architectural Committee were measuring and photographing my dock structure. I approached them calmly but firmly. "Excuse me, you are trespassing on private property." Janet flinched, clearly surprised to find me awake so early. James recovered more quickly. "We are conducting an official HOA inspection as authorized by community bylaws." "The bylaws do not permit unauthorized entry onto private property," I countered. "Please leave immediately." Section 12.4 gives the board right of access to inspect all exterior structures, James replied, reading from a tablet. "We are well within our rights." Section 12.4 requires 48-hour written notice before any inspection, I said, having memorized the relevant regulations. "I received no such notice. You are trespassing, and my security cameras have recorded your unauthorized entry." Their confidence faltered visibly. Without further argument, they gathered their equipment and departed, but not before James delivered a parting message. "The board will be addressing your continued noncompliance at the emergency meeting this weekend. I suggest you prepare accordingly." After they left, I inspected my dock thoroughly and discovered something disturbing. The security latch on my dock storage box had been tampered with, the lock mechanism bent as if someone had attempted to force it open. My security camera footage from 2 nights prior showed shadowy figures approaching my dock after midnight, though the distance and darkness made identification impossible. Later that afternoon, a certified letter arrived containing the most aggressive HOA action yet. A formal cease and desist order demanding removal of my dock within 72 hours. The document claimed my continued defiance constituted a community emergency, justifying immediate remediation. If I failed to comply, the HOA would hire contractors to remove the structure and place a lien on my property for all associated costs. The letter concluded with a personal note from Beverly Harding. "Your obstinance is harming community harmony and endangering the safety of your neighbors. The board has been more than patient with your refusal to comply with clearly established regulations. We will take all necessary legal actions to resolve this matter permanently." That evening, several neighbors received hand-delivered notices about an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for Saturday morning. The agenda included only one item: resolution of North End water safety hazard. My property was not specifically named, but everyone would know exactly what, and whom, the meeting would address. Standing at the edge of my lawn that night, I looked out over the dark water. What had once been my peaceful sanctuary had become a source of constant stress and confrontation. The dock lights reflected on the gentle waves, illuminating the simple wooden structure that had somehow become the center of a neighborhood power struggle. In just a few weeks, I had gone from welcomed new resident to community pariah, all because my legally owned dock stood in the way of Beverly Harding's profitable Marina expansion. The systematic campaign against me was clearly designed to either force my compliance or make my life so uncomfortable that I would sell my property and leave. What Beverly and her allies failed to understand was that their escalating tactics were having the opposite effect. Each new letter, each trespassing incident, each attempt to damage my reputation only strengthened my resolve. I had invested everything I had to secure this small piece of lakefront paradise. I would not surrender it without a fight, especially not to someone abusing their authority for personal gain. As I turned to go back inside, I made a decision. It was time to stop playing defense. If Beverly Harding wanted a war over water rights, I would give her one, and I would use the very legal system she thought she controlled to turn the tables on her marina expansion dreams. The county library proved to be an unexpected sanctuary. In the quiet reference section, surrounded by thick legal volumes and microfiche records, I could escape the constant surveillance of my neighborhood while conducting crucial research. I spent hours poring over books on riparian law, the complex legal framework governing water rights for property owners adjacent to bodies of water. One particularly useful text, Waterfront Property Rights, a legal framework, contained exactly the information I needed. In our state, waterfront property owners held clear rights not only to their land, but also to a designated portion of the water adjacent to their property. These riparian rights included reasonable access to navigable water and protection against encroachment that would diminish that access. My second meeting with attorney Marcus Thompson took place in his wood-paneled office overlooking the county courthouse. This time, I brought not only my property documents, but also the HOA's marina expansion plans and evidence of their intimidation campaign. "They are playing hardball," Marcus observed as he reviewed the cease and desist order. "But they have overreached significantly. The HOA has authority to regulate aesthetic standards and community facilities, but they cannot simply override clearly deeded property rights." He pulled out my property survey, comparing it to historical maps of Lake Westmore. "According to these boundaries, your water rights extend 50 feet from the shoreline. The proposed marina navigation channel clearly encroaches on that zone." "So they have no legal right to remove my dock?" I asked. "Not on the grounds they have claimed," Marcus confirmed. "But we need to look deeper. HOAs can be creative in finding ways to exercise authority." Marcus suggested I consult a specialist in maritime boundary law. Catherine Wu is the best in the state for waterfront disputes. She has defeated several HOAs in similar cases. 2 days later, I sat across from Catherine in her downtown office. Unlike Marcus's traditional space, her office featured modern furnishings and wall-mounted screens displaying nautical charts and property maps. After reviewing my documentation, she focused on one particular aspect I had overlooked. "The historical survey maps show something interesting," she said, pointing to faded lines on a century-old chart. Before the community was developed, this entire shoreline had different property boundaries. When the original developer created shoreline estates in the 1970s, they established specific water rights allocations that were incorporated into all subsequent deeds. Catherine typed rapidly on her keyboard, bringing up a digitized version of the original development plan. According to this, your property's water rights actually extend 75 feet from the shoreline, not just the 50 feet mentioned in your current deed. How does that help me? I asked. It means the HOA is not just encroaching on your current water rights. They are attempting to take control of water access that has been legally tied to your property for nearly 50 years, Catherine explained. And there is more. The original development agreement with the county required permanent preservation of all private water access points established in the initial property divisions. This revelation shifted the entire legal landscape. Not only were my rights stronger than I had realized, but the HOA's actions potentially violated county development agreements that predated their authority. Back at home, I organized all the evidence I had gathered into a comprehensive timeline. Photographs of HOA members trespassing on my property, security footage of the dock tampering attempts, copies of the misleading newsletter articles, and records of the escalating threatening communications. That evening, I spread nautical charts of Lake Westmore across my dining table. The current marina occupied the southern end of the lake, with a single entrance channel connecting to the main body of water. The expansion plans would widen this channel significantly, extending it northward, directly into my water rights zone. Studying the navigation requirements for larger boats, I realized something critical. Due to the lake's natural shoreline configuration, the only viable approach for the expanded marina entrance would require boats to pass through the water directly adjacent to my property. If I could legally establish markers at the boundary of my riparian rights, the marina expansion would face a significant navigational obstacle. Catherine had explained that while I could not block reasonable navigation on the lake, I had every right to mark the boundaries of my water rights and restrict unauthorized entry into that zone. The HOA's assumption that they could simply override these rights for their marina project demonstrated either legal ignorance or deliberate overreach. The next morning, I placed a call to the County Waterway Management Office. I would like to schedule an official survey of my riparian boundaries and obtain permits for proper marker placement, I told the clerk. I am a waterfront property owner at Shoreline Estates and need to clarify my legal water rights. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of calm determination replace the stress of recent weeks. For the first time since this conflict began, I had a clear strategy, not just to defend my property, but to actively challenge Beverly Harding's marina expansion ambitions. I drove to the local hardware store and purchased a "No Trespassing" sign, which I mounted at the entrance to my dock. It was a small act of defiance, but it represented something much larger, my decision to stop retreating and start advancing. Beverly Harding had chosen to make this personal. Now I would show her exactly what happened when she picked the wrong homeowner to bully. The official survey of my water rights began at dawn on a crisp Tuesday morning. 2 county waterway management officials arrived in a small boat, equipped with GPS mapping technology and boundary marking supplies. I stood on my dock, watching as they methodically mapped the legal extent of my riparian zone based on both my current deed and the historical property allocations Catherine had uncovered. "Your attorney submitted excellent documentation," the lead surveyor commented as they worked. "These historical allocations are very clear. The boundary extends 75 feet from your shoreline at its widest point." By mid-morning, temporary marker buoys had been placed at the precise boundaries of my water rights. The bright orange floats formed a clear demarcation showing exactly where my property rights extended into the lake. The surveyors provided me with official documentation, complete with GPS coordinates and county certification. These temporary markers will be replaced with permanent navigational buoys once your permit application is processed, the surveyor explained. Usually takes about 2 weeks. Those will be official waterway markers that must be respected by all boat traffic according to state navigation laws. My next stop was the county records office, where I formally registered the updated riparian boundary survey and filed for the permanent marker permits. The clerk stamped each document, creating an official record of my actions. These will be entered into the county waterway navigation charts within 30 days, she informed me. All boaters will be legally required to observe these boundaries. I made multiple copies of all documentation before heading home. As expected, word traveled quickly. I had barely arrived when Beverly Harding's luxury SUV screeched to a halt in front of my house. She emerged with 2 board members in tow, their faces masks of barely controlled fury. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded as I stepped out onto my front porch. "Those markers are interfering with lake navigation." I remained calm, retrieving a folder from inside my house before responding. "Those markers designate the legal boundaries of my riparian rights, as confirmed by county survey this morning." I handed each of them a copy of the survey documentation. "My water rights extend 75 feet from shoreline, based on the original development allocations." Beverly's face flushed as she scanned the documents. "This is ridiculous. The HOA has jurisdiction over all waterfront structures and access." "The HOA has jurisdiction over community property," I corrected her. "Not over my deeded water rights, which predate the HOA's existence by several decades. The county has already registered these boundaries and approved permanent markers." James Wilson flipped anxiously through the papers. "This will impact the Marina expansion channel. Boats would have to navigate around these boundaries." "Yes, they will," I agreed. "Just as they have had to respect my property rights all along, rights your Marina plans conveniently ignored." Beverly stepped forward, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "We can make your life very difficult, Mr. Miller. The board has numerous ways to enforce compliance." I held up my phone, which had been recording our entire conversation. Threats from an HOA president with a documented financial conflict of interest regarding the Marina project. I do not think that will look good in the county commissioner's office, or in court. They departed without further confrontation, but the battle was far from over. The next day brought immediate consequences. The Marina manager began warning boaters about the unauthorized markers in the lake, encouraging them to file complaints with the Waterway Management Office. Of course, these complaints went nowhere, as the markers were fully authorized and documented. The real impact became clear during the weekend when boat traffic typically increased. Vessels attempting to access the marina now had to navigate a much narrower and less convenient channel to avoid encroaching on my clearly marked water rights. What had once been a wide, straight approach to the marina entrance was now effectively reduced by half, creating delays and frustration for marina users. From my dock, I watched as boats lined up, waiting their turn to navigate the narrower channel. Several larger vessels struggled with the tighter turning radius, nearly colliding in their attempts to reach the marina docks. By Sunday afternoon, a group of angry boat owners had gathered at the marina office demanding explanations. The emergency HOA meeting called for that evening drew the largest attendance I had ever seen. The community center meeting room was standing room only, with residents spilling out into the hallway. I arrived early, selecting a seat in the back row where I could observe without being immediately noticed. Beverly Harding called the meeting to order, her usual composure noticeably strained. "We are facing a crisis regarding lake access," she began. "As many of you have experienced this weekend, navigation to our marina has been severely impacted by unauthorized boundary markers." A boat owner near the front interrupted. "We waited 45 minutes to dock yesterday. What is going on?" Beverly attempted to redirect blame. "Unfortunately, one homeowner has taken it upon himself to restrict lake access in defiance of community standards." She pointed to a map of the lake displayed on the wall, highlighting my property and the marker buoys. "These obstacles have created a hazardous situation that threatens our marina operations." Another resident stood up. "I thought those were official county markers. They have proper navigation flags." "They were improperly obtained," Beverly insisted, her voice rising. "The board is taking immediate legal action to have them removed." That was when I decided to speak. Rising from my seat, I addressed the crowd calmly. "Those markers designate the legal boundaries of private water rights that have existed since the original development of shoreline estates. They were placed by county officials after thorough survey and documentation." Beverly's face tightened with anger. "Mr. Miller is deliberately interfering with our community marina project. His selfish actions are harming everyone's property values and lake enjoyment." "Is that the marina project being built by Harding Marine Development?" I asked loudly. "The company owned by your husband and son. The contract worth millions that you never disclosed to the community when pushing for approval." The room erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Beverly attempted to regain control, pounding her gavel for order. "That is entirely irrelevant. This is about community safety and access." "This is about abusing HOA authority for personal financial gain," I countered, my voice carrying across the now silent room, "and attempting to seize private property rights to facilitate that gain." Beverly's composure finally shattered. "We will remove those markers and your dock if necessary. The board has the authority to take emergency action for community benefit." Her outburst was met with shocked silence, and I noticed several residents holding up phones, recording her threats. I remained silent, letting her words hang in the air as residents exchanged concerned glances. She had just publicly threatened to destroy private property in pursuit of a project that would financially benefit her family. As I left the meeting, several residents approached me quietly, asking for copies of my documentation and expressing concern about Beverly's leadership. The tide of community opinion was beginning to turn, not because I had convinced them to take my side, but because Beverly Harding had finally revealed her true priorities to everyone. The week following the emergency meeting brought a remarkable shift in community dynamics. What began as a trickle of supportive neighbors soon became a steady stream of visitors to my home. Richard and Corinne Davis, who had first warned me about Beverly's tactics, organized an informal gathering of concerned residents in their backyard. "We have all been too afraid to speak up," Corinne admitted as nearly 20 neighbors nodded in agreement. "But watching how she targeted you, and then her outburst at the meeting, was the final straw." I shared copies of my legal documentation, including the historical property surveys showing that many lakefront homeowners had similar riparian rights that predated HOA authority. More importantly, I produced evidence of Beverly Harding's undisclosed financial interest in the Marina expansion project. Her family stands to make over $2 million on this contract, I explained, showing them the public records Catherine had helped me obtain. She never recused herself from any vote related to the project, never disclosed the conflict of interest, and actively used HOA resources to clear obstacles, like my dock, that stood in the way. The evidence sparked outrage among residents who had long tolerated Beverly's strict rule enforcement, believing it was for community benefit. Learning that at least some of her actions served personal financial interests changed their perspective dramatically. Meanwhile, my attorney Catherine served formal notice to the HOA board documenting their legal violations and demanding immediate cessation of all harassment. The notice included a detailed timeline of trespassing incidents, inappropriate threats, and selective enforcement actions, along with reference to Beverly's recorded threats at the public meeting. 3 days later, a petition calling for a special board election circulated throughout Shoreline Estates, quickly gathering signatures from over 70% of homeowners. The widespread support forced the remaining board members to schedule a community meeting to address the leadership crisis. The atmosphere at this meeting was entirely different from previous gatherings. Board members entered to find nearly every resident in attendance, many wearing blue ribbons that had spontaneously become a symbol of support for homeowner rights. Beverly arrived last, her usual confident stride replaced by cautious steps as she surveyed the hostile room. Board Secretary Michael Thompson opened the proceedings instead of Beverly, a clear indication that power dynamics had already shifted. Given recent concerns raised by community members, we will begin with an open discussion of the Marina expansion project and related property issues, he announced. We believe transparency is essential to restore community trust. Beverly attempted to control the narrative, rising to speak first. While some have raised concerns about the Marina project, I want to assure everyone that all actions taken by this board have been in strict accordance with our bylaws and for the benefit of property values. Her words were met with skeptical silence. Then Richard Davis stood up, holding copies of the documents I had shared. We have evidence that you failed to disclose your family's financial interest in the Marina contract, which constitutes a clear conflict of interest under both HOA bylaws and state law. Other residents began speaking up, sharing their own stories of Beverly's selective enforcement and intimidation tactics. With each testimony, her position visibly weakened. Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing that they had aligned themselves with a sinking ship. The turning point came when Catherine Wu, my attorney, addressed the meeting. Though not a resident, she had been invited to present the legal facts surrounding riparian rights and HOA authority limitations. Her clear, professional explanation left no doubt that many of Beverly's actions had exceeded legal boundaries. The original water rights allocations in this community take precedence over subsequently created HOA regulations, Catherine explained. Furthermore, the board president's undisclosed financial interest in a project directly impacting those rights represents both an ethical violation and potentially actionable legal misconduct. After 2 hours of increasingly damning testimony, Michael Thompson called for an emergency board vote. In light of information presented today, I move that we, first, immediately suspend the Marina expansion project pending full review. Second, rescind all violation notices related to existing dock structures. And third, accept the resignation of Board President Beverly Harding effective immediately. Beverly protested loudly, but her objections were drowned out by calls for a vote. One by one, board members raised their hands in support of the motion, abandoning their former leader to protect themselves from the growing scandal. The vote was unanimous, with Beverly herself abstaining in bitter silence. In the weeks that followed, a remarkable transformation took place in our community. A temporary board led by Michael Thompson and two respected long-term residents initiated a comprehensive review of all HOA regulations and enforcement actions from Beverly's tenure. Dozens of violation notices were rescinded, and fines refunded to unjustly targeted homeowners. The Marina expansion project was permanently redesigned to respect all riparian rights, with a much more modest scope that focused on improving existing facilities rather than expansion. Most significantly, Harding Marine Development was removed as the contractor following a proper bidding process that Beverly had previously circumvented. A committee was formed to draft new HOA guidelines emphasizing transparency, due process, and respect for property rights. I was invited to join this committee, along with other homeowners representing different areas of our community. Our first achievement was establishing clear disclosure requirements for board members regarding any potential conflicts of interest. The permanent marker buoys designating my water rights remained in place, now properly recorded on all navigation charts and respected by boat traffic. Rather than continuing to be seen as an obstacle, they came to represent boundaries that protected everyone's rights, a physical reminder that even well-intentioned community governance must respect legal property boundaries. One sunny afternoon about 2 months after the confrontation had ended, I was replacing worn boards on my dock when Richard and Corinne Davis approached by boat. They asked permission to dock briefly, a courtesy that had become standard practice among neighbors respecting each other's water rights. "We are heading to the community picnic at the Marina," Corinne explained as they tied up. "The new board wanted to make sure you knew you are welcome to join. Many people have asked about you." I had deliberately maintained a low profile during the transition, not wanting to appear triumphant or vindictive in victory. "I might stop by later," I replied. Richard surveyed my repair work approvingly. "The dock is looking good. By the way, the Historical Society wants to formally document the original water rights allocations for their records. They think your case might help other communities establish better governance models." Later that evening, I did attend the community gathering. The atmosphere was noticeably different, relaxed, friendly, without the underlying tension that had characterized Beverly's reign. Michael Thompson, now the interim board president, greeted me warmly and publicly thanked me for having the courage to stand up for principles that benefit our entire community. As the sun set over Lake Westmore, I walked out onto the marina's main dock. From this vantage point, I could just make out my own dock in the distance, a small wooden structure that had somehow become the catalyst for community transformation. The water between us no longer represented a battleground but had returned to its proper role as a shared resource, governed by respect for both individual rights and community needs. A young couple approached me, introducing themselves as new residents. "We just moved in last month," the woman said. "Everyone tells us we missed quite a drama with the previous board president." I smiled, watching boats navigate respectfully around the marker buoys near my property. What matters is not what happened before, but the community you have joined now. Welcome to Shoreline Estates. As I walked home along the shoreline path, I reflected on how different things might have been had I simply complied with Beverly's initial demands. My individual surrender would have enabled a larger pattern of overreach affecting the entire community. Sometimes, Standing firm on principle creates ripples that extend far beyond personal benefit. From my dock that evening, I noticed a familiar figure on the neighboring property, an elderly resident who had previously avoided all contact during the conflict. He raised his hand in a tentative wave. I waved back, and something as simple as that gesture felt like the final piece of restoration. The water lapped gently against the pilings of my dock, the dock that still stood exactly where it belonged, a quiet testament to the power of knowing your rights and having the courage to defend them, not just for yourself, but for an entire community.